To be there we go. All right, we're live. Welcome to another episode of Roasting Marshmallows. My name is Rolf Zuid and I'm your host. On the show, we've been talking a couple of times about startups, both successfully and failed ones, because each startup will have its own story to tell. We just can't get enough of them. And so today we've invited yet another guest who has had his own startup, Erwin van der Koogh, founder of linc.sh. Linc is a front-end delivery platform, and it gives you a working, unique URL for every single commit in all your environments. This includes production, so that it will enable you to start gathering feedback instantly. Ultimately, Cloudflare acquired Linc in December of 2020, and Erwin now works there as a product manager. While starting a startup that ultimately gets acquired is an interesting topic in itself, super important part of the journey is actually getting the product out there, do the marketing and actually selling it. And Erwin has of course done this very thing, and he will enlighten us on how to approach this. Erwin describes himself as an eternal developer, recovering management consultant, and never satisfied with the status quo. All right, Erwin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. That's a great intro.
All right, thank you. You're calling from Australia?
That is correct, yes, Melbourne.
Yeah, Melbourne, Australia. Okay, nice. Yeah, I was because I've been in that corner of the world a couple of years ago, so I was a bit worried that the time difference was too large, but it's okay, right?
It's 10 hours now, I think, in sort of your summer and our winter, and it's 8 hours when sort of daylight time sort of switches around. So it's doable.
Yeah. And winter is relative, I suppose. Right? I don't think you're having snow.
No. Jeez. There's snow sort of in about an hour or two away from here. An hour.
All right.
But yeah, Melbourne doesn't get any snow, really. It's really cold now. It's cool. Like a couple degrees.
Okay. Cool. And joining me today is some co-hosts that I have. And Koogh, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
How's it going?
Yeah, looking forward for this conversation.
Yeah.
I have the opposite, experience, right? I bankrupt my startup, so I need to learn some tips on this.
Exactly. And you're calling from where?
Xebia.
Well, from the Floater.
From Vleuten,
the Netherlands.
All right, yeah, nice. It's almost at the same level as Melbourne, Australia.
Pretty close, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And the second co-host, Sylvester. Welcome.
Hey, man.
How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good, actually. I'm also looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So you and Erwin, you and Erwin actually go back, right?
Way back. We just talked about it a bit. I think I estimated that 15 years ago or something that we last actually met face-to-face or worked together.
2011, 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, I left, so yeah.
One of the last things I remember is actually the Christmas party with the ice skating ring.
That's definitely more than 10 years.
That's a long time ago.
And where did you guys work then at that time?
Xebia.
We worked, Xebia.
Oh, Xebia, okay.
The purple consulting company.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, so Erwin, you're a product manager now at Cloudflare. Yeah. And I know we're going to be talking about like what product managers can learn from your startup, from the things that you guys done right, obviously.
Well, we did I guess more wrong than we did right.
Yeah, well, we can definitely get into that as well. But I was just wondering, before we get into the story of indeed the startup and stuff, I was just wondering like what it is that you're doing now at Cloudflare as a product manager, and does it resemble anything in terms of like having a startup? Like, is it comparable?
Yes, it's very comparable in a lot of ways. Like certainly the way I got into Cloudflare and sort of like the position that I have. It's not a typical sort of product manager sort of role. So yeah, like a lot of what I do is sort of like how do we bring Cloudflare Workers, which is sort of their developer platform, like how do we bring that to more developers and sort of do more use cases. So, but also because I have a very technical background, like I sort of shift between like a lot of different roles. I switch between prototyping code, writing down ideas for sort of new ways, but also I'm very focused on like how do we do DevRel and how do we get better at sort of like DevRel and how do we get better at sort of selling in sort of like through our Salesforce sort of that we have, which is definitely a topic that I think we're going to be touching on because I have some sort of interesting opinions on that. I think that people.
Interesting or controversial?
Well, like I think they're interesting. Other people might deem them controversial.
All right, interesting. Okay, and yeah, so that is now, but you're not involved, in the startup that you end up got acquired by Cloudflare. You're not product managing that product. No. You've expanded to a total different.
No,
realm.
The startup and the product it's still running, but
yep.
the long-term plan is to integrate like the feature set of sort of Linc into Cloudflare's own platform called Cloudflare Pages.
Yeah. What's it called? Sorry,
Cloudflare Pages. It's a
okay. Cloudflare Pages.
It's a way to deploy sort of websites.
Yeah, because like when I read about Linc and what it does, like I kind of got the Netlify vibe, but you guys actually on the website describe like what sets Linc apart from Netlify. Is Cloudflare Pages also aiming to be like different from Netlify?
Yeah, like definitely. So right now it's a similar-ish sort of kind of feature set. But yeah, like we're definitely looking to take advantage of some of the more dynamic sort of platform features sort of that we have underlaying sort of Pages.
Okay.
So I have a question, like just to start, let's say, in a bit different way, the storyline. So when you start your startup, like were you also a developer, or you were a product manager, or you did also all the hats and everything?
Well, so yeah, like the way it's very, very different. My current job to my startup job was, at my startup I had about 52 heads. And in Cloudflare I only have like 4. But yeah, I started out as a developer, and sort of like product management sort of eventually more, like as the more the company sort of grew to about sort of 4 people, and so like I ended up doing less and less dev as we hired sort of more developers. But yeah, I've always been involved technically in the development side of things as well.
But how did you guys, get the idea for the startup, and how did you guys start out? Was it like a two guys in an attic type of thing, or was it like incorporated from the very beginning?
So like this is what is probably like the typical sort of startup journey. Is it started out as something entirely different.
Okay.
And it was basically like the story goes sort of back a long time. Like I was doing a lot of conference speaking. One of the things I love doing is looking at new tech and sort of figuring out like where it's going, and sort of like what the interesting sort of use cases are, and where's the value in this new tech. So at around 2014, around 2014, I started playing around with Docker, which had been released a couple months before, and that was one of the things where I was basically giving conference talks around Docker, which was the potential of this thing is off the charts. The technology itself is a bit meh, and the tooling around it is atrocious. And I get that for a while, and this is where it's going, right? Like this is sort of like where the tech will be going, sort of 5 to 10 years from now. And then sort of fast forward 3 years, 2017 maybe, 18? No, 17. Lambda came along, and I was giving conference presentations around the potential of this new tech is off the charts. The technology itself right now is still a bit meh, and the tooling around it is atrocious. So I'm like, wait. Yeah. I've given this talk before. And so I decided to, I had this sort of idea on, because like trying to figure out like where things are going, I was foreseeing like applications builds in Lambdas with sort of tens, hundreds of different Lambdas. Mm-hmm. So the initial plan was to build a deployment tool for Lambdas. Like how do you scale up beyond like a dozen or two set of Lambdas? So yeah, quit my job. Sort of started out with the sort of like prototyping, talking to customers, and what I realized is that no one had this problem, and no one was going to have this particular problem for at least another couple of years. And then I went like, shit. Like, what do I do now? Like, it's like I can't just like wait for years until the rest of the industry sort of catch up. But yeah, like during that, I did find like a bunch of interesting problems, and that had to do with like React specifically, like the hosting side of things. Because now we had all of these people that were like the companies that I were talking to that were doing, they were like on the cutting edge of these serverless sort of backends. They were running servers to like server render their React.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm like, well, this is an interesting problem. This is a problem that people are having right now, and there was a lot of, because there was multiple companies doing this, right? It wasn't just one; everyone was building these. So I'm like, so I did that. So I built a sort of React hosting, server-side rendering platform.
Yep.
And yeah, like the way that I had built it, what I realized is that one of the features that I could sort of build there for free was a like the preview link, where you could go and we could run many versions of your software in production, and you could just go there and then you could release when you thought it was good.
Yeah.
So it was basically free, and was selling it. I got a couple customers on it, but nothing. But I couldn't really. It was really hard to sort of sell. Like all of the big companies who had the problem had their own engineering teams to build it, and like the smaller people didn't really have that like SSR need. So it wasn't really working. It was working a bit, but it wasn't sort of growing as quickly as we needed it to. And yeah,
At this point, you were still bootstrapping. So no investors, just your own money.
No, I was doing sort of training on the side. I was running training courses on the side to sort of keep this going. And I'd hired my first dev at this particular point in time, or maybe not. No, I hadn't yet. Okay. I don't think I had.
And in this place, because I think this is also like well, at least the mistakes I made with my own startup is like, then did you kept developing? Did you kept thinking, oh, this new feature is gonna solve this problem, or did you already somehow had the right mindset of like, yeah, let's go sell it, let's figure out the real problem? You didn't fall into the trap of the feature fallacy.
Well,
issue.
like that's so very, very like inviting, right? Like I just need to build another feature. But no, like obviously we felt for it like a bunch of times, but it was always this, like, we need to sell this, right? Like, and this is good enough to sell to this particular customer segment.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and if you can't.
What was your target customer then? Because you said something about like, you know, the large companies have their own engineering teams, and the smaller people, like maybe like, how do you say, consumer level is probably a bit too expensive for them.
It was very much sort of like other startups, like that sort of like very much on the small side of the. We were trying like agencies, smaller startups of that side of the market.
Yeah.
And then sort of because for the bigger companies, like you often had built something already, but like we were just lacking features, like compared to their existing set of applications. So that's why. And I think this is sort of, Henrik, to sort of to get into your like the question there is one of the important things for me is that like don't try to take on like the thing where you need to have 24 features, right? Like if there's a target segment with 6, go after that target segment first, right? Because that's where and that's basically like when I mentioned I have an interesting opinion. Like that's it. Like you need to sell. Because you don't learn a thing unless you're selling it.
Exactly.
And I hear a lot of people saying, okay, you need to sell and start selling. How did you go about doing that? Because I'm an engineer from background as well, right? This was my thing. Okay, I need to go to the outside world now. So I'm just curious, how did you start doing this?
This is a great thing from my time at sort of Tibia, which is like years and years ago. I hated selling.
Yeah.
When I was a consultant, I was a techie, right? I hate selling. I can't do selling. I can't do anything in this whole sales thing. So I was talking to one of the salespeople like that I worked with, one of the big accounts that I was on, and I was telling him how much I hated sales. And he started laughing, and he looked at me, and he was like, "Oh, you're serious?" And I go like, "Yeah, no, I hate sales." And he goes, "So how many people are now working at your client?" And I go like, "Well, about a dozen or so." And he goes, "Well, how did they get there?" And I went like, "Well, my client had a problem. I knew who could solve their problem, so I got them in to solve the problem." And he goes, "So what do you think sales is?" And that for me was like, because for me, like, there's this sort of association with like cold calling, selling people shit they don't want, but that's like that can be like obviously that's also sales. But a lot of it is just helping people with problems they have, and I happen to have a solution for you. So let's go.
I like that position. That's kind of like a cool thing to think about it.
So
you have a problem, I'm helping you solve it.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't need to.
But then, you mentioned cold calling, for example, because like one of the things that I find a bit hard when I have something that I think could be useful to people, like how do you find these people? Like do you just go ahead and reach out to companies, or do you have a landing page where you put in like, hey, fill in your email here and let's get in touch? Like how do you motivate people to maybe get in touch with you? So like how do you bring your product and the potential customer together?
So like the thing for me, and again, this is me and sort of my personality. Like I work best with like people that I know. So like the initial thing you do is you just go and reach out to people that you know, like your network,
right?
And go, I have this thing. I'm pretty sure you have this problem. Can we chat?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Or even before, let's go and have a chat. And like, and this is also one of the things I learned sort of along the way. Like, is don't even talk about like your solution. Just go talk about their problems. Like, what are their problems?
Yeah.
And if they sort of go like, well, we have this thing where we host server-side React and it doesn't work and it falls over all the time. And you go like, that's interesting. That's interesting. I've been sort of building this thing. Like, you might be interested in trying. Right? Or they go like, oh yeah, we have this cool new React app, but sort of our SEO is shit. And I go like, are you server-side rendering by any chance? And I'm like, no, what's that? I'm like, oh, I've got this cool little thing that can do that. Yeah. Right? Now, obviously, that sales pitch sort of didn't work sort of often enough, but I gave it a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I think intuitively somehow, or your experience, I don't know, but it's like I was recently reading the book called The Mom Test, and the guy explained exactly that, like a lot of mistakes startups do, or people who is going to like try to explore or sell their product, they go and tell their solution all the time. And then people are always going to say like, oh yes, that's nice. Oh yes, that's interesting. Oh yes. And then they fall this mistake of constantly people are validating like what your mom would say, right? Oh, you are so pretty, sweetie. And then you are actually not. But, and I think you are touching exactly that thing. You need to forget about your solution and really talk to them and try to understand which problem they have. But I think it's pretty hard. So
obviously this isn't easy. Yeah, like certainly not if you have this really cool thing, right? Like I just want to talk about my cool thing. Look at all the cool things my cool thing does, and just go. They don't care. They really don't care. Like they've got 50 problems, and they only have time to think about like the top 3. So like, and that's the other thing. Like if you're not in the top 3 problems, you're screwed, right? Because they don't have time for that. Yeah. Obviously they have the problem, but if it's not in their top 3, there's no chance.
Yeah, and then they'll just exactly.
If I pay you money, I may be able to solve problems 43. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just no.
And like in a lot of companies, like they fall into this way of working where they say like, oh, we have our dev environment and we have our test environment, and then it goes to beta, and then on production. And then you come and turn around, turn all of this on his head and say like, well, you can just commit your code and you have a different preview URL and they can just point to a different front end. Like, did it take long for potential customers to see the potential in that, to do proper A/B testing and all this kind of stuff? Or did you also have to convince them like, hey, technical, this stuff works seamlessly, and this is how your business can profit from it?
Yeah. So so when we talk about the story, like that's sort of like the next iteration, right? Because one of the funniest things that I still remember to this day was the hosting side of things. Was when I was going to a customer who was going live, and they're down the road by Australian standards, which means it's an hour.
2-hour drive.
It's an hour and a half sort of away. But sort of like they were going live, and the guy was a friend of mine. So I'm like, I'll just work from your office during the day. So if something goes wrong, I'm there and we can fix things. So yeah, like we're sitting on this sort of like long table. And one of the most amazing things was that the dev who'd been using sort of the product for a while, and the co-founder that I haven't met. But what happened during that day is that the dev would sort of make a change. He would commit it. He would grab the preview URL, sort of message it to the co-founder, who would open it up, go like, yeah, this is great, but this is not good. And sort of over the course of like 2 or 3 hours, they sort of pinged back these URLs. And the other thing is like the dev, the way he talked about Linc was as this way to share these preview URLs. So yeah, this was me sort of coming to the realization, going like, damn, like my bonus feature, like is the feature, and
you got it for free.
Huh? Like, it was the thing I built for free. Like it was just the thing I tacked on at the end, like, and that was the feature. Like that was the product, and like actually, like the entire product was an anchor. Sort of around our ankles, and we ditched the entire hosting stuff like a couple months later. And that's sort of when we started focusing on like just the previews and just that sort of before you go to production. And we would coordinate going into production, but you would host it sort of yourself.
You touched also another interesting point that I always found fascinating. Maybe you can give your like you said, you ditched the whole other part of the product. Like you mean like you delete it entirely, like gone. You remove it, you kill it from customers who are using it, totally gone. How did you do that?
Yeah, that takes some serious balls, right?
Oh, and more than that, like it's like it hurts like hell, right? This is the stuff that you build. Like we build in 3-4 months and spend another like 2 or 3 months, sort of refining and tweaking.
What would you say? What would you say for product managers? Because like we have this conversation so many times. Like, what would you say for product managers that actually it's a good strategy to delete the part of your product people are not using?
It's literally like it's the concrete around your ankles. Like it drags you down. You need to think about it. You need to support it. You need to migrate. You need to do like everything. Like kill it. Kill it.
Yeah, like an argument that we always get is like people saying, well, I mean, the code is there. It's not hurting anyone. It's just sitting there. So it's...
We already paid for it.
Yeah, we paid for it. It's tested and everything. Like what could possibly be the problem? But I like the analogy saying like it's weight around your ankles. It's dragging you down to the ocean floor.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's sort of what it is. Like, I had this great sort of conversation once. It was a course. It was a course by, and one of the sort of questions that was asked was like, is code an asset or a liability? And it was one of those exercises where, like, if you think it's a liability, go to this side of the room, and if you think it's an asset, go to this side of the room. And I stood in the middle, like, gobsmacked, and sort of slowly turned around and went to the liability side of the room on my own, because the other, like, 25 people were on the asset side of things. And I go, no, code is a liability. Like the capabilities that the code gives you, like that's an asset. But every line of code is a liability. And when you think about it that way, like it's something you have to maintain, right? You have to test. It's tested, yes. Yep. But for every change that we make, we got to test the thing again, right?
Yeah. And exactly. If you introduce something new, it doesn't play nice with the existing stuff.
There's stuff that you can't do because it doesn't work well with the old stuff. No, you have to get out. Yeah. You have to tell your customers to go, we're not going to do this anymore.
That's the part I wanted to ask a question about. How did you deal with that? Because you're a startup, right? Well, you're having clients, you're having customers, you're happy with your customers, and now you're going to tell them, okay, the main feature that I started out building this startup, I'm killing it.
We're killing it from our product. So what we did do is we helped, and again, we had like a handful of customers here, right? Like it wasn't like hundreds of thousands of people companies were using this. But yeah, like the handful that we had, we went like, this is a good way to host it, like yourself. And we will still manage like the coordination of it, but you've got to host it in your own account somewhere, right? So we just went like, if you're on AWS, this is sort of what you can do, and you just run it on AWS. If you're in Cloudflare Workers,
did you lose customers of this?
Maybe you even saved them money. Maybe they even thought like, hey, this is nice. This saves us a few bucks.
They didn't save them anything. Like it sort of added sort of a couple dollars to their hosting bills. But
like, did you keep your pricing even though you removed those functionalities, or how like this discovery came to be?
Used the same price. It was the same value, right? Like they didn't care about the hosting thing. Like, and actually, it became, and that's sort of like the fun thing. It became like easier to sell. Like it was still incredibly hard. And sort of to get back to your sort of earlier question, sort of like one of the harder things is that we looked like a whole bunch of things that we were not. So it was very easy to look at Linc and go, this is just like Netlify. And you just go like, no, we don't even host anything. Like, but we have preview URLs, and Netlify does as well, right? And Vercel does, and but they don't allow you to like do sort of configuration management, which is the bit that we did, right? And then they go like, we built your software, And we're like, you're like a build kite or a circle CI. And they're like,
Yeah.
no, we're also not that, right? Like if you have this particular thing, like we have almost everything, but we're not a general CI. Like if you had a backend, like we couldn't do anything, right? If you had like a front end, we could help you. But if you didn't have that, like there was nothing. So it was really, and that's like the reason we ended up like in the sort of like the acquisition, was that we just couldn't, like we were growing, but we weren't growing at a sort of fast enough rate.
And how did this perception came to be before we get to the acquisition part? Because I was a bit curious, because you said like, they view us as something that we're not, or they're comparing us to products that we're, not really are trying to emulate. Was that like part of the proposition that you guys had? Like, was the message not clear enough, or was it, these other companies just drawing to conclusions from what they saw on the website?
Yeah, like obviously it's all like my fault, right? It's not my customer's fault that they can't see what we are.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and that's one of the first things to get right? You can't blame your customers for not understanding you. No matter how tempting that is, and I may or may not have done that at times. Well, I can, like, maybe, right? We'll never know.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you can't blame your customers, right? Like, and like human beings are so used to pigeonholing things, right? We don't have time. Like we like, how many times a day do you find about new dev products alone? Like there's a couple a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just look at them and go, this is a bit like X. This is blah, but a bit different, right? So people would sort of come across the Linc website and go, this is blah. Like one of the things that worked. So first of all, like who you're talking to, like is one of the most important things to sort of get right, and that's like who are you having sort of traction with? What sort of people who sort of get it? And we were a bit unlucky because like from the website, like converting from the website was really hard. Converting on sort of like in-person sort of sales, that worked reasonably well. And by far the best was sort of refers, right? People that were using it. One of the best compliments we've ever gotten was one of the first devs that used it was a guy that we shared an office with, the company, and he was there when we were building the thing, and he goes, I want that. He left that company and started to work for a new company, and it took him about a day and a half for him to go, screw this, like I'm not developing any more front ends without Linc, right? So he got them to sort of buy into it. So, and that's sort of what we found. Like referrals were like the way it would go, right? Because if you're browsing a website and go, it's really you do the pigeonholing, the 24 seconds. But if another person that you sort of know and respect and sort of that they know what they're doing, go, you should really check this thing out because it's been so good, it's been great, blah. That for us, like figuring out like what that sort of growth, like where does your growth come from? We had
so when did you realize like, oh, I finally reached this so-called product market fit?
I don't think there is like a product market fit, right? Like we talk about this mythical thing about like the product market fit. I don't necessarily think there is like a point where you go like, on Tuesday, like December 17th,
everything clicked.
Like that was when we hit product market fit. So
you mean it's a moving target?
I don't think it's a moving target, but it's that sort of like we were, what we like the point that we got to is we were selling, we were making money, we were growing, but we weren't growing fast enough. Right? Like, is that if we could sort of get people to understand sort of what we were about.
But like fast enough of what? Like user base wise, money wise, company size wise? Because also for me sounds very vague. Like, how do you define if you're growing fast enough?
Sort of money, like revenue wise.
Yeah, okay.
Because you guys were bleeding money then, or you weren't profitable?
Oh no, we weren't profitable. Like we were, like,
okay.
But that's like at some point you just got to. Even if we would have been sort of profitable, because we like by the time we sold, we still had sort of money in the bank, right? Like it wasn't sort of desperate, but it was this. Like you get to this point where. Like you have your sort of head in a wall, and you can only like bash your head against that wall for so long,
so many times.
The wall
until you sort of go like, well, maybe there's this other way, and that's sort of like a lot of sort of where we ended up. We were sort of COVID was one of those moments where sort of everything changed. Because we had been focusing on in-person sales for sort of a good 2-3 months, sort of enterprisey sales, and like that entire pipeline like disappeared in 4 days, I think it was. Like, it was just nuts.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, like that meant that we had to sort of switch to that like referrals, but we couldn't grow the referrals fast enough because we hadn't like a big enough customer base yet. And so it was basically down on that sort of like marketing self-serve, and we never got that messaging like really nailed down.
I think that's one of the hardest problems, right? At least one that we're also still working on. Getting your message spot on.
You're never finished with your messaging and your comms.
That's my moving target.
But it's this sort of so one of the hardest things is that we never really, so we were never, like, we always had this feeling of like we were one good proper break away from getting to that sort of critical point where sort of that sort of referrals would start to become sort of meaningful enough as sort of a growth driver. But yeah, like we had a hard time like cutting through and getting to that point, that critical mass that we needed to sort of get to.
And then how did you guys came into the picture at Cloudflare? Was it like, did you guys push for selling the company, selling the product, and saying like, okay, let's just
not at,
well, it's not giving up, I guess, but
like they reached out to us.
Okay.
Because like we were ahead of sort of where their product was, certainly at the time, and even still in in the area that we focused on. So like we were still, like they reached out to us. It was funny because we were going to reach out to them. For like more of a partnership, like a marketing, because we were integrating with them with Cloudflare workers, and there was this great sort of synergy. So like we were about to reach out to them. We had been talking like on like sort of employees and the product manager and the DevRels level. But they reached out about sort of an acquisition to us the week before we were going to reach out to them.
Wow. So do you consider that a lucky move?
So, so then like it still, the whole thing took another sort of 3 months to sort of settle and sort of get done. But
how does that feel? Because like I can imagine, like in one way, kind of like a relief maybe, because like you said, because of COVID, stuff kind of dried up? Or was it more like, oh man, been working on this startup for so long, put my heart and soul in there, and now...
There's like it's all of it. Like it's not an either or an or.
Yeah.
Like you have all of the emotions all the time. It's that sort of relief in finding out that employees get this thing called like salary, I think it's called. It's great. It's great. The companies just like transfer you money every month. And, so that's great. For us, like my co-founder and I sort of got in the startup space to change the way like software is written, because we feel that it's not very good right now, to keep this podcast somewhat sort of PG. But yeah, so like being able to do that on sort of with Cloudflare's reach, with Cloudflare's tech and the stuff that sort of Cloudflare workers can do and will be able to do is just... So yeah, like it was really cool to be working on that, but we had investors at this particular point in time. So like a large part of the negotiations was making sure that our investors sort of got taken care of. And that we had cool jobs. One of our employees didn't want to come, so like how do we take care of them? So yeah, like, there was a lot of, but in the end it was a good deal. But yeah, you still go, it's my baby, right? Like it's but also there's so many cool opportunities now. So it was a good deal. Like in the end, I was really, really happy with it. So, like everyone walked away from it happy.
So I know you for a bit, right? So how many startup ideas have you had since you decided to sell?
More than zero.
Would you do it again?
Oh geez, no, I will do it again. I mean, there's
not if, it's when.
Yeah, it is but it's funny how it works, right? Because when you sort of running a startup, I'm not sure if it's sort of similar feelings sort of Henry, but like it's this like cool thing to do. So whenever you're at like a networking event or like a party, and you're like, what do you do? Like, I'm a startup founder. And I'm like, it's so cool. I want to start my own startup. And you just go, why? Like, are you dumb? Like, why would you run a startup? Like, are you like, it's an incredible amount of stress. It's an incredible amount of time. And like the reward, like the average reward is nothing. Like your expected outcome of a startup is you're lucky if you walk away with the clothes on your back, right? Like exactly. Why would you want to do this? It makes no sense. And then they look at you like, but you're doing it. And they go like, yes, because I'm dumb. Like I cannot not do this, right? Like I have this thing that I need to make happen.
Totally not a feeling.
And that's sort of what I need to do this. Like there's no way I can not do this. So like, I've had startup ideas. I haven't had one where I go like, yeah, that's something that I would like spend 5-10 years on instead of building it again. So also because it's got a really cool job now. So it'll be a couple years.
And I guess also like you learn quite a bit, right? I mean, I think that's the part of I would say this is the payoff of you build your own startup. Like the amount of learning you get in this short amount of time is ridiculous. If you would compare, if you were just in an enterprise company or something, it's insane. So I can imagine the next startup is going to be something much easier, right? In the sense of like...
Yeah, just like your second kid. It's going to be much easier.
You're going to do a much better job,
It does not.
You just make new mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Probably. And
all right. So I was wondering because we were talking about like you need to start selling, and we already kind of talked a little bit about product market fit. But I do wonder how do you know that your product is in a state where you can comfortably say like, all right, I'm going to be selling this? Is that something you want to be able to do from day one?
So, like, it depends, right? It greatly depends. Like, selling from day one is unrealistic in most cases. But it also depends a bit on what you, like, how you define sort of selling, right? Like.
Well, I mean, I guess it starts with validating the idea that you have, right? So maybe like a lot of startups probably begin with a landing page, and then where people can reach out and say like, hey, we have this idea of a thing, and let us know if that is something you would be interested in. Do you believe in that kind of an approach?
No, not even remotely. Go talk to people, and again, like this goes back to that. Like, I'm going to build this amazing solution. Do you want my amazing solution? Yes, of course I want your amazing solution.
Exactly.
I love your amazing solution. It sounds great.
Yeah.
And then you forget about the entire thing until you get an email 6 months later and go like, who are these people? Right? Like, just like nonsense, right? Like, it's this. So selling for me is like, how do you get people to invest sort of anything in it? Right? So this may be just time to learn about it and install it, right? Like, there may not even be any money involved.
Right.
There's just...
But just to get it out there.
Sort of a couple of people here from Melbourne that I sort of know built this thing called Pact, which is a contract testing.
Yeah. Oh, they're from Australia.
Yeah, amazing people. Sort of met Beth and the other one.
Danger zone, man. Forgot the names.
I'm going like, yes. They're going like, oh, shout out to Beth and sort of Matt and... those are two people I know best. But yeah, like they had this open source thing, and they didn't even think of building a company, but there was, like, they were just building this contract testing thing, right? But then you see like how much an impact that has and the community that has, and then you can sort of go, well, what are your problems with contract sort of testing? And then once you talk to enough of these people, like then you can talk about like, oh, we're going to build Pact Flow, right, which is their sort of commercial offering on top of sort of Pact. But they knew that there was like a lot of interest in Pact because there was people from all over the world who were using it, right? So, like, it depends a bit on what you mean by selling, and you're always ready to like pitch a conversation, right? Like, what I mean by that, like, just go to someone you know who's a busy person and go, I'd like to talk about this issue with yours, this sort of area. I want to talk about testing. Do you have some time to sort of talk through about how you guys are testing and blah? Right? Like that's already sort of started. But if people can just go click, I'm interested, I've never gotten value out of that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I can agree with you. There's also that you need to have something at least for them to really try. And I think mostly is wrong the way how we or I did approach customers or potential customers. It is always with the message that they cannot say no. And then you kind of, is the worst case, right? Because you are going to the wrong direction, thinking that you are going the right direction.
Yeah,
and
oh geez, yeah.
Really sad.
Yeah, definitely. But on the other hand, the sort of owner of Chibia, like where sort of Sylvester and sort of I worked, he had one company that we had built a bespoke deployment sort of tool for. And he basically sort of went to them and went, we're going to build this into a product. You're going to get a 5-year license for this thing, and we'll make sure that it's sort of exactly what you need, and it's just going to cost you a couple $100,000 euro.
Yeah.
And they signed the contract and paid a couple €100,000 to, and there was nothing. Like, well, there was the bespoke solution that we had built for them, but the product wasn't there. So yeah, on day one, he sold a contract worth a couple $100,000, euros, based on, well, their reputation and sort of like the work that we had done for them.
Yeah, exactly.
But so yeah, you can sell on day one. There's nothing preventing you from doing that or trying it. But yeah, you should sell sort of as soon as you have anything.
Yeah, but that was kind of like where I was trying to, well, not trying to, maybe I phrased it a bit wrong, but how do you know, because like, and he said in the very beginning, it's easy to fall into the feature trap. So like, what is this moment where you can say like, okay, you know, now I'm comfortable to sell this product? Is that just something that you cannot really...
do you like charge money for it? Or
no, like indeed, just push it to people, say like, hey, I made this cool thing, can you take a look? And
like as soon as you have an end-to-end case working, and you have to make sure that end-to-end case is like the tiniest thing possible, right? Yeah. But just go, and that like one of the hard things that we had, like because in the middle when we had that sort of like hosting product, that was annoying because you can't really sort of go, we got this shitty, crappy hosting that may or may not sort of fall over your production app. I'm like, so that was hard. But other than that, yeah, like just when you're ready, like and so you like the point is way before you think it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like way before, not just like a little bit before, but like it's way before you think you're ready. Like you are more than ready. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the quote that I keep forgetting the name as well. So I have the same problem as you, naming. But I heard this quote once when I was also in this startup acceleration program. If you are not ashamed of the first version of your product, you launch it too late.
Yeah,
right?
I think from
that's
LinkedIn.
That one.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it's yes and no, but like it's exactly that, right? Like you waited way too late. If you're like if you're comfortable selling it,
that's it.
Yeah, it's definitely sort of too late. You'll have to too late. No, like and there's so much to learn from just selling things.
And now that let's say you are now or a bigger company, right? They have different products, and you work as a product manager. Do you approach product the same way, or do you have more like, we have more money, we have more, let's say, buffer, so you do things in a bit different way, or do you still approach in a very like kind of startup hustling way?
Yeah, like bigger companies obviously have very like they have these sort of silos, right? Sales is selling and sales is over there, and we're product and we're over here, right? So it's harder to do, but luckily, like Cloudflare is in this. I certainly like the position that Cloudflare Workers is in. It's a bit of the startup-y. So like there's very much a sort of a startup vibe in like the Workers team because there's it's phenomenal. Like there's only 20, 30 devs maybe? I don't even know. But like there's tens, right? There's just definitely not hundreds. There's a handful of PMs, and that's basically it. Like there's one sort of marketing person, and so like it's run pretty much sort of like a startup, like and obviously, but with the resources of a large company, the sales force and the blah. But even then, like, I sort of go out and talk to customers and sell like any opportunity I get. Just because like that's where that's where we learn.
That's the job as well, right?
No, it's actually not, right? Like my job, like if like technically my job is to come up with cool ideas and sort of get them implemented. Right? Like stuff
Okay,
that
but let's say
my job is
that's
to talk to customers to figure out what they want. But my job certainly isn't to sell like day to day.
no, okay, not day to day, but in the end of the day, you are selling, right? I mean, we can, at least in my point of view, a product manager is also always selling something. You are selling a solution for their problem, or you try to understand their problem. I can understand that you have, let's say, a silo, and that person is there with the how to say, the job description to sell it. But somehow I found hard to believe you as a product manager is not selling, in a way.
Well, sort of, yeah. Well, like we now are not, but like, and again, because the way Cloudflare is structured is very differently, and there's a bit going on, but not like a lot. But most product managers that I've worked with have nothing to do with selling. They would talk to customers,
Okay.
they would come up with ideas, they would get those ideas implemented, and they would ship them. And nobody would even like look at what the effect was of releasing that feature. Right? No product manager sort of that I've worked with, like almost none, would ever go back and figure out what happened to that feature that they shipped.
Isn't
then
that kind
How
of
do you know
important though?
that it's worth it then? Or how do you know, like, oh, I need to kill this then?
Oh, but you don't, right? But that's like these are the same companies that just like keep collecting features, right?
Yeah, okay.
Like, and that's almost every company. They'll get like this is not something that's like way out there or like big enterprises. This is every company of every size is sort of driven by this like desire to build new things.
There's never a story, delete this, right?
No, well, there wasn't.
So,
There wasn't mine, but yeah, like exactly. No one goes, well, we ship this thing, no one's using it, and of course there are in like the big amazing sort of companies that everyone looks up to, the Atlassians and they like Google obviously does this regularly. You know, like it doesn't make a billion, so there we go.
Yeah, let's kill it. Yeah.
hey, so should you become a product manager if you haven't run your own startup?
Yeah, like there's definitely nothing. Like there's nothing that you sort of can't sort of pick up, but yeah, like it's that. It's definitely very. I find it extremely helpful, right? To just having sort of put sort of your own money and sort of other people's money like in this thing to actually, because that's what I find
so
like
learning
like
the hard way.
a lot of like product managers and product owners that sort of go, or sort of coaches, like agile coaches, sort of these sort of great people, and sort of obviously I was one of them at some point. The sort of like great opinions on how you should do product, and I go, yeah, but you've never done product, like you've never like, so it's hard to learn things that you learn when you're investing sort of your own money and your own time into this thing, because then it becomes really critical, right? Whereas if you're in this large company, like obviously we're not going to delete this thing because there's a few customers using it and it's bringing in some money, so it's okay. We'll and that's sort of like where you sort of get this rut where you're just building features.
Yeah.
So would you recommend everyone dreaming to become a product manager to first just go ahead and start a startup?
Don't be dumb.
Yeah, probably.
No. Like
Don't be dumb.
I can absolutely recommend joining one. Like
All right. Yeah.
that sort of small product company. Like the stuff that you can sort of learn and pick up in those sort of companies is invaluable as a product manager, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sort of it's because that's one of the good things about startups, and you have this finite amount of time, right? And you can calculate very precisely sort of when you're going to go bankrupt. And then you should absolutely deduct another 2 months because never going to be that. Which I may or may not have done once. Ooh, I thought it was going to be later than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like at any point in time you can do this calculation, and like there's nothing that focuses the mind more than that. Right? We're not going to have a week-long ideation session about this thing because we don't have time for this.
We're dead.
Yeah,
Exactly. You want to talk about deadlines?
yeah.
Well,
These are proper deadlines, right? But
exactly.
But you don't want to do one thing in this space. Like you want to do as many of these things to sort of figure out. Like, and that's. But also, it's in that sort of thing with sort of marketing and sales and product. Like that's where a lot of the magic happens. And that's because we build a feature and marketing goes, yeah, that's great, but like, what are we going to say? That we're now not as shit as our competitors anymore? Or is that sort of like just we build a feature that they already had? Like, that's not something I like to put on our front side. Like this feature that everyone else has, we also now have. Right? So that's like in sales and sort of marketing. And like that's where, like if you're in a company where you can work with those people, like that's a way better thing to learn because these people presumably know something about marketing and or sales. Whereas as a startup founder, you are pretty sure don't know a lot about either of those, or product management. Like joining a small product company is probably the best thing, in whatever role, right? Because like even as an engineer, or
because you're going to see all of the aspects.
You're going to see exactly like what you're going to be involved in this thing.
Yeah.
So
Cool. All right. And to recap then, like what product managers can learn. So I guess we touched upon, you can start selling as earlier as you probably can think. And don't be afraid to kill. You should start selling. You must. Yeah. And you can kill features if indeed, it's hurting maybe your sales pitch.
One of my major regrets is that I haven't killed something. Like in Linc, I should have killed something that I didn't. And
we're now going to browse and see what it is.
No, because I still haven't killed it because we were acquired before I had the time. But no, like I should have killed something in Linc 6 months ago, like 6 months before the acquisition. And I would have improved the product, and I would have improved our pitch. So
All right. And another one was. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I think what I really liked and that will stay top of mind is selling is not actually selling, right? It's actually solving the other party's problem. And I really like that mindset. Yeah. You're there to solve the problem.
And if they don't have the problem, you don't sell, right? You just go, great, thanks for telling me about all your problems. I can help you.
Yeah, that was what I was about to say. Indeed, like instead of like all these crazy marketing campaigns to do cold acquisition, like just explore the network, talk to the people one to one, get some people to champion your product because that that is going to help you.
Also try like the Google AdWords and the sort of the other ads. Like it may work. It didn't for us for a lot of reasons, but it's this sort of like try and figure out what works. For you and for me and for my product, it was indeed just going out to my network. I know a lot of people in tech. I've been in it for sort of a decade or two. I know a lot of people. Go out and talk to them. That worked for me. But maybe it is a Facebook campaign, right? Like for your product.
Yeah, could be for sure. Yeah. All right. Any other takeaways that we missed, guys, in terms of the lessons learned from Erwin's journey?
Don't start a startup.
Do not start a startup.
Unless you cannot not do it.
And I think what's interesting is you were talking about getting the message right. Well, and recently Enrique recommended another book to me, which I started reading. I think that could be interesting for a lot of people facing that challenge. It's actually called Story Brand from Donald Miller. Not sure if you read it,
Nope.
Erwin, but it's pretty good. It really explains, okay, what do people actually read and what are they triggered by.
Okay. So
That's,
while we're on
my
while we're
recommendation
on that
this week.
subject, obviously awesome by April Dunford is the thing that sort of really nailed it for me, like around positioning and categories, and it's the small tiny book, and it's just you read it in one go, like it's really good.
All right. And so how's life now for you, Erwin, after the exit at Linc, or the acquisition of Linc? Like, do you have a Ferrari and a Bugatti in the garage and a private island somewhere in the Pacific?
I don't know about the island. I don't know.
Australia, right?
Yeah, there's a couple islands off the coast that I'm pretty sure I can plant the flag on, and it'll be mine. So I haven't looked at that much because there's quite a bit of restrictions traveling. And in the garage there's absolutely an Asda 3. So nice. I absolutely made it.
Yeah. Cool. And at Cloudflare, you guys are doing some exciting things,
it's great fun.
Doing cool stuff there.
No, like the stuff to do, Edge, JavaScript, like it's such a fun playground. The tech that they have in Cloudflare is just so cool to build on top of. Right. we're gonna release a whole bunch of cool stuff over the next couple months.
All right. Well, maybe we can follow up this episode with maybe some of the cool stuff that Cloudflare is releasing or will release soon.
Awesome.
But for now, I think I don't have any other questions. I don't know, Enrique or Sylvester, if you.
No, it was great catching up and hearing the stories again, and we should do this more often, maybe more than once every 10 years.
Yeah, let's make it at least 5.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Cool.
See you guys.
All right. So Erwin, thank you very much. I also would like to thank the listener, of course, for tuning in. If you have any suggestions or questions for us, you know where to reach us. That's 4Scouts on Twitter or podcast@4scouts.nl. Erwin, can they? Do you have a Twitter or something where people can?
VANDERKOOGH. Or my initial and my last name concatenated on Twitter.
Yeah.
All right. We'll include it in the description for everyone interested in reaching out. All right. Thank you guys very much, and see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Scoutcast, Roasting Marshmallows, with your host, Rolf Surd. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit 4scouts.nl and on Twitter @4scouts. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Scoutcast, Roasting Marshmallows.